I'm gonna go ahead and record this for posterity. That way, you know, I can report this to EA so they can see exactly what I'm talking about. That's not possible, what he's doing right there. It's just not. Like, you run out of boost eventually. The bombers don't do that normally without a program. So yeah, cheating bastard.
How's it going? I'm Lions, and we're going to go through Slam Bomber. Let's start by taking a look at the loadouts. We're going to use a Slam Engine and Reinforced Hull. Slam Engine is going to give us a speed nerf, and Reinforced Hull is going to give us an acceleration nerf, which means our deceleration rate is going to be lower, so that's great. And it's going to make us more survivable, so definitely a good combination. The main reason we're using Slam Engine is because it allows you to bank boost, and that's going to come in tremendously helpful later on, as we're about to get to. So just to give you a bit of a visual guide on what to look out for when I'm referring to things, at the moment I am currently shifting power between engines and weapons, and I'm about to start shunting power between engines and weapons. And it affects different meters on the screen, so that's something to bear in mind and look out for. Next we'll talk about boost skipping. So to illustrate the difference between boost skipping and regular boosting, I'm going to do a long regular boost, so here's the boost. And then I'm going to do a drift, which you'll see now. So now I'm drifting around. It's an inefficient way of flying. Boost skipping is when you boost and then immediately initiate a drift so that you don't expend any more boost energy than you need to, and then you ride out the rest of the drift for as long as you want to. It's much more efficient, and you can see that here it's this kind of very jumpy movement. So for reasons that will become clearer later, there are two things you need to do. One, basically always set your throttle to 0. If you do that, it's going to work out better. You'll stall less. And the other is make sure that you're holding the drift. If you don't hold the drift, you're wasting it. Next up, we're going to do some dead drifting. Dead drifting is effectively maximizing your drift time by pulling power out of your engines, and I'm going to show you why you also want to have your throttle on 0. So here is a drift. This drift is going to be with full power to engines and your throttle on full. And you can see that the drift does not last very long. It caps out at the expected maximum speed of your throttle position. Next, with the power to weapons, you can see the drift holds for a lot longer. This is because with power out of your engines, your deceleration rate is decreased. Next, I'm going to show you the difference throttle makes. So, full power to engines, but with 0 throttle, you can see that the deceleration rate is the same as it was before, but you're going to ride the drift all the way down to 0. And now finally, you can see with 0 throttle and the power to weapons, you have the longest possible drifts because you're taking advantage of both the extended drift time and also the deceleration reduction. Finally, let's do some multi-drifting. You can see as I change my angle of attack while drifting, my vector doesn't change. Multi-drifting, on the other hand, allows you to ride out a drift and change your vector without having to reinitiate any boost, which is more efficient in terms of boost management and energy management. So you're going to see that in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go towards that piece of debris, and you'll see the change in orientation as I press shift my drift key now. And that sent me along another vector without having to spend any boost energy. Now every time you do this, it's going to reduce your speed a little bit every time you press the button, and you only have until the original drift you generated through the use of boost runs out. So in a TIE bomber you get maybe 2 or 3. Okay, now those basics are out of the way, we can talk about energy management and how to use this thing. So, to start with, we're going to be putting power into weapons and using weapons as our battery, our generation source for our power. Because we've got power when we come out of the flagship, we can shunt straight over into engines, which I'm about to do now. Because we're in Slam, it doesn't degrade. Now I can boost skip around using dead drifts like we saw earlier. That means that my average speed is going to be really high even if I'm only boost skipping at a slow rate. And if I keep my rate sufficiently slow, it means that by the time my boost meter is depleted, I'll have generated enough power through my lasers to shunt back over and refill the meter. The cadence for this is something like every 3 seconds. Or you can look at your speedometer, when it reaches about 180 to 190, that's a good time to reinitiate a boost. Just bear in mind that if you use multi-drifting, you find a stepped reduction in your speed, more so than you'd normally have with a drift. And for that reason, I usually use a sense of timing rather than referring to the speed. You can use a bit of both. Because you're in these long dead drifts all the time, and you have a reservoir that, despite replenishing, is still a reservoir, multi-drifting is very effective at being energy efficient with this build. So how do you fire in a slam bomber? So while you're in the dead drift, you shunt over to weapons, you fire away, and then you shunt back into engines when you want to move. It's that simple. Let's take a slow motion view of this. So I'm firing. I'm going to boost skip, holding the drift, power stays in weapons, and when I want to fire, shunt back into weapons and just fire away. When I need to move again, you're going to shunt back into engines, and then boost skip in the direction you want to go, hold the drift, and then just shunt back into weapons and fire. It's a very simple way of doing things, and if you don't make any mistakes, you don't panic, you won't run out of energy. So what shouldn't you do with this setup? One thing that people may do instinctively coming from a jet bomber or other fighters and ships in this game is to boost skip quite rapidly, being used to the rapid generation of boost that jet engine affords. Because you have instant access to replenishment from your weapons bank when you shunt over to engines, it can be a deceptively easy trap to fall into if you're not used to the engine type, and you can feel like you can get away with it, but if you do it, you can run out of energy as I just have on screen. So it's very important to stay to a cadence that will keep you energy positive. One thing you shouldn't do is be overzealous in shunting over from your weapons to your engines. That's because there's a recharge delay every time you do this. And that means you'll be energy negative if you do it too much. Your rate of expenditure will exceed your generation rate. You can see when I do it on the screen, every time I shunt, it hangs before recharging. And if you do it too much like this, you're going to run yourself totally dry. Okay, let's put some of this into practice. So using the dead drifts and using some of those energy management techniques, you can do some cool things on frigates and capital ships in general. So around this frigate here, I will do some longitudinal orbits. And what this means is that I can basically get more or less constant uptime on my guns. They are always on the target and they're always getting damage in. These are not the best orbits I've ever done, but they're fairly representative of an average run you can get with a bit of practice. You can get these a bit closer and you can get a bit more time on target with your guns. You can be a bit more evasive, but this is a pretty good starting point. Like I said, a fairly typical example. Another thing I said I'd talk about in one of these videos was getting dumbfire or light in general off on the armpit of a Nebulon B to strip turrets. So I was waiting there for the shields to go down, dumbfire goes off, goes into that armpit area and gets 4 turrets in one.
And Mike at the mark.
Okay, thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been informative. Maybe you've learned something, maybe you haven't. Let me know if you have any thoughts, any feedback, any suggestions. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I think most of you know how to find me on Discord. You can always shoot me a comment on YouTube. Anything you like, I'm happy to help. And happy flying.